Thank you very much. Minister, thank you for being here. Childcare is primarily the responsibility of the Minister for Children, but I believe that there could be a planning solution to the serious shortage of childcare places in local communities, and it won't fix everything, but I think this is the kind of change that we really need to see. The 2001 childcare facility guidelines for planning authorities are in place to steer our local planning authorities like Fingal County Council on the provision of childcare facilities for local communities. But the guidelines aren't delivering. They aren't delivering the quality and affordable childcare places in communities that are desperately needed. The current planning guidelines stipulate a benchmark of at least one childcare facility per 75 dwellings in new housing developments, and it's recommended those services would look after approximately 20 children. And that's reasonable, and it would have gone a long way to avoiding the problems that we have now. But what's not reasonable are the grounds under which developers or builders can get around those requirements. Firstly, like the number of studio or single bed apartments in the development, like people in one-bedroom apartments don't have babies, or that there may be childcare facilities in adjoining developments, even though they might be full, or that they may not take into account the types of childcare that people need. So there might be an ECCE provider, but they might not have all-day care. So they don't take into consideration the nuance that is required. And what's also not reasonable is when childcare facilities are required under planning and they are actually built, but they're not opened. And there are numerous examples of this in Dublin West. We wouldn't let social housing sit idle like this when there is a community and a social need. So why are we doing it for childcare? So not only that, but the childcare providers in my area, some of them are ready, willing and able to open new services, including the units that were planned and built for childcare, and they can't get a call back from the builder or the vendor. And some of these units are sitting idle for years while families suffer from a lack of childcare, and then the builder invariably applies for a change of use. They also seek to postpone childcare to a later phase of the development and maybe a bigger unit, which means it's limiting the kind of childcare provider that it might be suitable for, and of course that the planning authority has less leverage over them then to make sure that they do it. Some of the buildings that are built aren't economically viable for providers, or they might be just shy of what's required under regulation. And I know from talking to planning authorities that they have to battle with builders and developers to provide childcare facilities, and they want them to. And the same thing is happening under strategic development zones, even though the point of an SDZ is to make sure community services and housing come together in new developments. So I think by tightening up the planning system, we could stop this dodging and dithering. I reached out to our 30 county childcare committees who try to match children and families with services and engage with childcare services about possibilities for expansion. Under the same guidelines, county development and local area plans are to have policies in relation to childcare provision, including consultation and participation with county childcare committees. I reached out to all 30, 16 of them came back. All but one said there wasn't enough engagement with their local authority in relation to the delivery of childcare places. Only 6 of those 16 had contributed towards the recent county development plans, and every single one of them said supply was not meeting demand, in particular from birth to ECC preschool. So how do we match demand and supply if no one is responsible for overseeing the delivery of the different types of childcare that's needed locally, if no one is actually matching demand with supply, and if the system of delivery is this ad hoc? The system needs to change.
I want to thank Senator Corey for raising this important matter. I suppose I want to give a bit of context, because I think you're going in very much on a planning issue, so I want to give context. So the National Planning Framework 2018 recognised the importance of the provision of childcare facilities, specifying that the continued provision and enhancement of facilities and means of childcare and young people, such as childcare schools, playgrounds, parks and sports grounds remain necessary and will need to be maintained at similar levels for the foreseeable future. We're doing a review of the National Planning Framework at the moment, so that's the current plan. We're doing a revision of the existing one as we speak. We hope that finalised by next May. Furthermore, the National Planning Framework includes a specific National Strategic Outcome NSO 10 entitled Access to Quality Childcare Education and Healthcare Services, while National Policy Objective NPO 31 identified the requirement to invest in a childcare ECC planning function for monitoring, analysing and forecasting investment needs, including identification of regional priorities. Provision of childcare facilities and new and refurbished schools on well-located sites with or close to existing built-up areas and meets a diverse local population. The childcare committee should be very much feeding into that. You've highlighted that. National Planning Framework policy approach sets out that the provision of childcare facilities should be planned to meet needs. In this regard, the Department of Children monitors early learning and childcare capacity on an ongoing basis, with a particular focus on responsibility to the unmet early learning and childcare needs of families. The Department of Children also liaises with the City County childcare committees to match the children and family with vacant places, and NDP funding has been allocated to that department to provide new places. Officials from the Department for Housing, Local Government Authorities are also currently engaging with officials from the Department of Children and Equality in relation to the need to update the current Section 28 childcare facility guidelines for planning authority in order to support this policy, and my department taking this very seriously. The 2001 guidelines for planning authorities related to childcare facilities were issued in 2001 by the Department of Housing under Section 28 of the Planning and Development Act 2000 as amended, to provide framework to guide both the local authorities and developers to consideration of planning application with specific regard to the consideration of childcare facilities. Planning authorities in Burpon are required to have regard to the guidelines and carrying out their functions. The guidelines are intended to ensure a consistency of approach to treatment of applications in respect to the land use planning aspects of childcare provision for relevant planning applications, developer and childcare providers, and formulating and considering development proposals. Subsequently, the then Department of Environment issued Circular PL 032016 in March 2016, which, having regard to the extension of the ECC scheme which you referenced and the associated increased demands on childcare facility with effect from September 16, requested the planning authorities expedite all pre-planning applications, consultation requests from childcare facility providers in relation to the proposed to extend opening hours, to increase capacity and to provide new facilities, expedite insofar as possible consideration of all planning applications or Section 5 declaration in respect to childcare facilities in order to facilitate the expansion of required capacity as appropriate. This circular also requested that planning authorities exclude matters relating to childcare facility standards outlined in Appendix 1, Childcare Planning Guidance 2001, and I'll go down through it, including the minimum floor area required per child from consideration of planning relating to childcare facility, and to solely focus on planning-related considerations following the remit of the Planning Development Act 2000 amended to terminate such planning applications. In light of the policy approach and set out within the National Planning Framework, and more recently positive events in relation to provision of childcare, an interdepartmental meeting was held in 2002 to discuss the review of the 2001 guidelines, and further engagement has taken place more recently. It's a matter I'd follow up personally on. It has been agreed between the departments that in the first instance feedback will be required when planning authorities are part of this review, and steps are currently being taken to engage with these key stakeholders. And for this ongoing engagement, the Department of Children has now been included in the updated list of provided bodies that need to be notified in certain planning matters, including the formulation of county and city development plans and local area plans. The review that's underway with the local authorities plus the departmental group, I will take to give that priority, and I'll take a personal interest in it myself. And it falls under my remit in terms of Minister of State and Department of Housing with responsibilities for planning.
Thank you, and I'm aware of that review and I'm glad that it's happening. The reason I'm pitching this to you is I think I pointed out why the guidelines aren't delivering, that they're not working. So what I'm saying to you, Minister, is I think that we need a part, in the same way as we take with social housing, we take a Part 5 approach. We need to take that approach when it comes to childcare. A childcare facility should be mandatory in a new development and in an area that needs childcare. It should be agreed before commencement. During the pre-planning stage, childcare facilities, similar to approved housing bodies, could express their interest and work with local authorities and the developers on the type of childcare facility that is required in that area. And if there aren't private suppliers that are available to do it. And in other cases, the state, the Minister has said that there is going to be a future dedicated agency for childcare. The state should step in and should acquire those facilities and should run those facilities as community childcare with the assistance of the committees on the ground. And that would bridge the gap that we have between planning and provision. And the local authorities are up for this because they don't want to battle with builders to do this. So the Part 5 approach would close that gap. Thank you very much.
Minister.
So I want to thank once again Senator Curry for raising this important matter. And I think really what we want at the moment is you've identified what the issues are. In your view, it's now about process. So there's currently a review underway in terms of the planning guidelines around childcare facilities. Secondly, there's, in terms of officials from my department and Department of Children are now engaging in relation to updating the Section 28 childcare facility guidelines, planning applications, with feedback from the individual local authorities. But the point that you put forward in terms of the Section 5, I'll feed that in to be considered as part of this review process. I think what we really want is it's hugely important for parents, mothers and fathers, that they have adequate childcare facilities in their own areas. And in terms of people being able to, people are under enormous pressure in their daily lives. They want to go, ideally, within walking distance from where they live for childcare facilities. That should be the objective. And that people can live and rear their families in their own locality. I think you've raised a very, very important point. I'll feed it into the review group, and it's something I'm going to take a direct interest in terms of the planning aspect. Thank you.
Minister. Senator Robbie Gallagher.